Welcome to the show. We hope you'll stick around. Mr. Sean is here to terrify and put you in the ground. We've got spooky, we've got scary, we've got horror still unseen. Genre Miniatures is here to stay. We hope we make you scream.
Welcome back, Chimera crew, to another episode of Europe's most notorious serial killers. Last time, we covered the killers of Northern Europe. Links to that video can be found in the description. We now move to the Western region. If you enjoy this kind of content, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And possibly, if you could be so kind, check the links to my many other options for channel support. And with all that being said, let's begin. Today we begin our journey in France with Marcel Petiot. Marcel Petiot was a French doctor who gained notoriety as a serial killer during World War II, primarily targeting Jews seeking to escape Nazi-occupied France. Born in 1897, Petiot served as a doctor in Paris and gained the trust of many people due to his medical practice and political career. However, he used his reputation to lure desperate people, especially Jews, promising them safe passage to South America in exchange for large sums of money. Instead of helping them escape, Petiot murdered his victims, pocketed their money, and disposed of their bodies. His method was particularly gruesome. He would drug his victims, telling them they needed vaccinations for their journey, then inject them with lethal doses of cyanide. Afterward, he would dismember their bodies and either burn the remains or dispose of them in the Seine River. In 1944, police discovered the remains of 23 people in his home, leading to a high-profile investigation and trial. Although he claimed to be working for the French resistance, his actions were driven by greed and a complete disregard for human life. The trial of Marcel Petiot shocked post-war France. He was charged with 26 murders, though it's believed the actual number of victims was much higher. Petiot defended himself by saying he had only killed Nazi collaborators, but this explanation did little to sway public opinion. In 1946, Petiot was convicted and sentenced to death by guillotine, a fate he met later that year. His case remains one of France's most notorious, blending wartime chaos with personal madness. Petiot's story became a dark chapter in French history, where the horrors of war provided cover for even darker individual crimes. The blending of political violence with serial murder, in his case, complicates the narrative of serial killers, demonstrating how opportunism, chaos, and sociopathy can combine in devastating ways. His case serves as a reminder of how unchecked power, even in the hands of a seemingly respectable professional, can result in unimaginable horrors. Next, we hop the border over to Germany with Fritz Haarmann. Fritz Haarmann, known as the Butcher of Hanover and the Vampire of Hanover, was one of Germany's most notorious serial killers. Between 1918 and 1924, Haarmann murdered at least 24 young men and boys in Hanover, using his role as an informant for the police to avoid detection for years. Haarmann's modus operandi involved luring runaway boys to his apartment, where he would sexually assault them before biting through their throats, a particularly gruesome method that earned him the Vampire moniker. His crimes were shocking both for their brutality and for how long they went undetected. Haarmann operated during a time of post-World War I instability in Germany, where many young boys lived on the streets and disappeared without much notice. Haarmann, working as a petty criminal and police informant, exploited this chaos to his advantage. After killing his victims, he would dismember their bodies and dispose of the remains in the Lane River. There were also reports that Harmon may have sold human flesh on the black market during the post-war food shortages, though this claim was never fully substantiated. The discovery of human remains in the river eventually led to Harmon's arrest in 1924. His trial was a media spectacle, shocking the public with its gruesome details. Harmon's casual demeanor during the trial, where he freely admitted to the murders, only added to the horror. He was convicted of 24 murders and sentenced to death, a sentence that was carried out by guillotine in 1925. Harmon's case remains one of the darkest in German criminal history, a grim reminder of how societal chaos can be exploited by the depraved individuals of the world. The legacy of Fritz Harmon still lingers in Germany today. His case is often cited in discussions about the failure of law enforcement, as Harmon's role as an informant likely allowed him to continue killing for longer than he might have otherwise. It also highlighted the vulnerability of young homeless populations in times of social instability, a theme that has recurred throughout history in the context of serial murder. Heading back over Germany's western border, we enter Belgium with Marc Dutroux. Marc Dutroux might not just be Belgium's most famous serial killer, he may in fact be their most infamous criminal of all time, responsible for a string of kidnappings, rapes, and murders that shocked the country in the 1990s. Dutroux abducted 6 girls, 4 of whom died while in his captivity. His crimes involved constructing a secret dungeon in his house where he kept his victims, some of whom he sexually assaulted repeatedly. What made Dutroux's case particularly notorious was not only the horrifying nature of his crimes, but also the massive failures by law enforcement that allowed him to continue his actions for years. Dutroux had previously been convicted of kidnapping and raping young girls, but was released early from prison, a decision that would have tragic consequences. After his release, he abducted more victims, hiding them in a makeshift dungeon under his home. 2 of the girls died from neglect after being imprisoned while Dutroux was in jail for car theft, and police failed to discover them during searches of his house. His eventual arrest in 1996 led to national outrage as evidence emerged that authorities had overlooked numerous opportunities to capture him earlier. The Dutroux case sparked widespread protests in Belgium, with the public demanding accountability and reform. The White March protest saw hundreds of thousands of Belgians take to the streets expressing their anger at the perceived incompetence and corruption within the legal system. Dutroux was sentenced to life in prison in 2004, but the case led to significant changes in Belgian law enforcement, with a focus on better coordination between police forces and more stringent oversight of criminal investigations. Still, Dutroux's case left deep scars on Belgium, not only because of the unspeakable crimes he committed, but because of the systemic failures that allowed him to operate for so long. His name remains synonymous with one of the darkest periods in the country's recent history, a time when both institutional incompetence and individual evil combined to produce tragic outcomes for innocent victims. Next, we head north into the Netherlands with Willem van Eyck. Willem van Eyck, known as the Beast of Harkstede, is one of the most notorious criminals in Dutch history. Active from the 1970s until his arrest in 2001, Van Eyck killed at least 5 women, primarily targeting prostitutes. His first known murders occurred in the early 1970s when he killed 2 women, for which he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. However, Van Eyck was released after serving 18 years, a decision that would prove fatal for future victims. After his release, he resumed his killing spree, murdering at least 3 more women before his final arrest. His method of murder was brutally direct. He would lure his victims, typically prostitutes, to isolated locations where he would sexually assault them and then kill them, often by stabbing or strangulation. His deep-seated hatred for women, particularly those who worked in sex work, fueled his violent tendencies. Despite the brutality of his crimes, Van Eyck was able to evade detection for years after his release, in part because his victims were from marginalized backgrounds that did not always attract immediate police attention. Van Eyck was arrested in 2001 after a body linked to him was discovered, finally bringing an end to his decades-long killing spree. His final conviction led to a life sentence without the possibility of parole. He became a key example of the dangers posed by releasing violent offenders, sparking debates in the Netherlands about the parole system and the handling of dangerous individuals. The Beast of Harkstead case highlighted the risks inherent in the early release of violent offenders, especially those with a clear pattern of behavior. Van Eyck's ability to continue killing after his first release underscores the difficulties that authorities face in monitoring and assessing individuals with deeply ingrained violent tendencies. His crimes remain among the most horrific ever seen in Dutch history, a chilling reminder of the deadly potential hidden within seemingly rehabilitated individuals. Heading next to Northern Ireland, we have Robert Black. While born in Scotland, he committed his first kill in Northern Ireland. A truly heinous and despicable individual beyond measure, Black would eventually be convicted for the kidnap, rape, and murder of 4 girls between the ages of 5 and 11 in a series of crimes committed between 1981 and 1986, all across the United Kingdom. His first conviction came for an event in 1963 when Black encountered a 7-year-old girl playing alone in a local park, whom he lured to a deserted air raid shelter on the pretext of showing her some kittens. Black would then assault and choke the girl into unconsciousness before committing acts of self-pleasure over her unconscious body. Black was arrested for this a few days later, and this could have been the end of his heinous actions. However, a psychiatric examination he was given suggested the incident was an isolated one and that he did not need treatment, and as a result, he received the lightest sentence possible for what is frankly an unforgivable act. Black would go on to commit many more acts and somehow avoid any type of serious punishment for them, eventually becoming a long-distance van driver that gave him access to much of the United Kingdom. His first known murder occurred in 1981 and was that of 9-year-old Jennifer Carty of Northern Ireland. Black would go on to abduct, SA, and then drown this innocent child. His later confirmed victims would be 11-year-old Susan Maxwell and 5-year-old Carolyn Hogg of Scotland, and 10-year-old Sarah Harper of England. In 1988, he would attempt to abduct a teenage girl named Teresa Thornhill of England, but he was unsuccessful. It would be another 2 years after this failed abduction before Black was arrested in July of 1990. Black would go on to be put on trial and be convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment for his heinous actions. The 8-year nationwide inquiry which culminated in his 1990 arrest proved to be one of the longest, most exhaustive, and costly murder investigations in the United Kingdom. By the time investigators had amassed enough evidence to convince the Crown Prosecution Service to charge Black with these child murders and attempted abduction, the dossier they had assembled was estimated to weigh 22 tons. While Black never actually admitted to any of his crimes, shortly before his 1994 trial, he was asked why he had never denied any of the charges brought against him. And he replied, "Because I couldn't." Fortunately for the people of the world, Black died of a heart attack on the 12th of January 2016 at the age of 68. Continuing our trip through the United Kingdom, we enter Scotland with Peter Manuel. Known as the Beast of Birkinshaw, Peter Manuel is one of Scotland's most notorious criminals. Active in the late 1950s, born in the United States to Scottish parents, Manuel moved to Scotland as a child, where he grew into a delinquent youth. His early crimes involved petty theft and sexual assaults, which escalated to violent burglaries and eventually murder. Between 1956 and 1958, Manuel went on a killing spree that claimed the lives of at least 7 people, though some suspect he was responsible for up to 9 murders. His victims were typically murdered in their homes, with Manuel often breaking in, stealing valuables, and then killing his targets in cold blood. One of the most chilling aspects of Manuel's crimes was the brutality and randomness of his murders. His victims included women, men, and even children, showing a complete lack of remorse or discrimination. Manuel often killed entire families, as in the case of the Watt family in 1956, where he shot Margaret Watt and her 2 young daughters in their home. What made Manuel even more terrifying was his ability to evade capture for years. He would sometimes return to the crime scenes, or even use items he had stolen from his victims, brazenly flaunting his sense of invincibility. He was finally arrested in 1958 after police connected him to several murders through forensic evidence and witness testimonies. His trial became one of the most sensational in Scottish history, partly because Manuel chose to represent himself in court. His decision to act as his own lawyer, combined with his chilling confessions, made the trial a media spectacle. Manuel displayed an eerie calmness throughout the proceedings, confessing to some murders while denying others. He was convicted of 7 murders and sentenced to death. In July 1958, he was hanged at Barlinnie Prison, bringing an end to his reign of terror. Peter Manuel remains a notorious figure in Scottish criminal history, his legacy one of fear and brutality. His case shocked the public and highlighted the vulnerabilities of law enforcement at the time, as he had managed to kill for years before being caught. The psychological grip Manuel held over Scotland during his killing spree left an indelible mark on the nation. His crimes and the spectacle of his trial are still discussed as one of the darkest chapters in Scotland's modern history, and he remains the country's most infamous serial killer. Next we head to Wales with John Cooper. Known as the Bullseye Killer, he is responsible for a string of brutal murders and home invasions during the 1980s. His most notorious crimes are the Pembrokeshire murders, where he killed 2 couples, Helen and Richard Thomas in 1985, and Gwenda and Peter Dixon in 1989. His method involved violently entering homes or targeting people in isolated areas, robbing them, and then killing them in cold blood. The Thomas family was murdered in their remote farmhouse, which Cooper set on fire afterward to cover his tracks. In the case of the Dixons, Cooper abducted the couple while they were walking on a coastal path, tied them up, shot them, and then stole their bank cards. Cooper's crimes were shocking not only for their brutality, but also for their apparent randomness. His victims were targeted simply because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. This unpredictability, combined with the fact that he used their bank cards after the murders, left the Pembrokeshire community in fear for years. Despite being questioned by the police multiple times, Cooper was able to evade capture due to lack of evidence, and his violent career continued unabated. What added a bizarre twist to his story was his 1989 appearance on the British game show Bullseye, during which he unwittingly revealed his familiarity with the very area where he had committed the Dixon murders. Cooper was finally arrested in 2009, over 2 decades after his first known murders, thanks to advancements in forensic technology. A review of cold cases, combined with DNA evidence found at the crime scenes, linked him to the Pembrokeshire murders and other violent crimes. Cooper was convicted in 2011 of 4 murders and several counts of rape, sexual assault, and burglary. His trial garnered widespread media attention, with the cold-blooded nature of his killings and his arrogance during his earlier interrogations shocking the nation. Cooper was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. His crimes would leave a lasting impact on Wales, particularly the small communities where his murders took place. The sheer brutality of his killings, coupled with the fact that he eluded justice for so long, made his eventual capture and conviction a moment of profound relief for the victims' families and the Welsh public. Cooper's case also underscored the importance of technological advancements in solving cold cases, as his capture would not have been possible without modern forensic techniques. To this day, Cooper remains one of Wales' most notorious criminals. And last but not least, we come to jolly old England, with a notorious and heinous individual thought to potentially be the most prolific serial killer in history. Dr. Harold Shipman. Often referred to as Dr. Death, Shipman is responsible for the deaths of at least 250 of his patients over a span of more than 2 decades. Shipman was a trusted general practitioner in Hyde, Greater Manchester, and used his medical authority to murder his victims, most of whom were elderly women. His method was to administer lethal doses of diamorphine, aka heroin, often disguising the murders as natural deaths by falsifying medical records and death certificates. Shipman's case shocked the world, not only because of the staggering number of victims, but also because it revealed the terrifying potential for abuse of power within the healthcare system. Shipman's killing spree began in the late 1970s, but it wasn't until 1998 that his actions started to raise suspicions. His pattern of behavior involved visiting his elderly patients, often alone, and administering fatal doses of drugs, later claiming that they had died of natural causes. He would then alter their medical records to suggest they had been seriously ill prior to their deaths, covering up any wrongdoing. What made his crimes particularly heinous was the trust placed in him by his patients and their families. Shipman manipulated this trust, betraying the very people he was meant to care for, which added an additional layer of horror to his actions. The investigation into Shipman's crimes was triggered by the suspicious death of Kathleen Grundy, an elderly patient who died in 1998. Shipman had falsified her will, attempting to leave her estate to himself, which aroused the suspicions of her daughter. A police investigation followed, leading to the exhumation of Grundy's body and the discovery of lethal amounts of diamorphine. This breakthrough prompted a deeper examination of Shipman's patient records, revealing a shocking pattern of suspicious deaths over many years. In 1999, Shipman was convicted of 15 murders and sentenced to life imprisonment, though it was later determined that his true victim count was likely much higher. Harold Shipman's case had profound repercussions for the medical community and the broader public. His ability to kill so many patients undetected over such a long period led to widespread changes in the way medical professionals are regulated in the United Kingdom. The Shipman Inquiry, a government investigation into the case, led to reforms in the certification of deaths, prescription monitoring, and the oversight of doctors. Shipman's actions not only destroyed lives, but also eroded trust in healthcare providers. In 2004, he hanged himself in his prison cell, ending the life of one of the most notorious killers in modern history. And that ends this segment of our most notorious serial killers of Europe series. Join us next week when we head to Southern Europe for even more heinous individuals. While it would be a bit morbid to ask if you are enjoying this content, if you are at least entertained by it, I would recommend once again that you like, comment, and subscribe. We're still trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and liking and commenting shows the algorithm that this channel is worth recommending to others. If you would like to support the channel monetarily, this can be done by becoming a channel member, joining the Patreon, or checking the links and heading on over to eBay and Mercari, where I sell a multitude of affordably priced custom miniatures. Until next time, Chimera crew, stay safe, stay spooky, trust no one, and Alpha great day, and an even beta tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Now the show has reached its end, but fear it doesn't fade. Mr. Sean will haunt your dreams in the shadows where we've played. We've brought you chills, we've shared the frights, but the nightmares won't be gone. Chimera miniatures whisper still until the break of dawn. So don't forget, we'll meet again in the darkness and the gloom. Thanks for watching, now close your eyes, we'll be lurking soon.